Welcome to the Perfect Life Awakening Show, hosted by Royce Morales. Royce has been a transformational facilitator, teaching groundbreaking, spiritually based courses for more than 4 decades. She is the author of 3 books about her teachings. Join Royce as she takes you on a journey into how to live your best life and find your true purpose through discovering the origins of subconscious, disempowering notions and releasing them. She talks with experts and inspiring people just like you who learned to trust their intuitive inner wisdom, which led to life-changing shifts. Today, her guests live an empowered existence and are helping change the world to a higher consciousness place based on truth and love. You deserve to awaken to, align with, and embody your true self and live a life filled with love. Transform yourself from triggered to empowered and create your perfect life. Here is your host, Royce Morales.
Hi, I'm so glad to be back. In case you guys didn't know it, I missed a couple of weeks of shows because I had quite an adventure. And right after I did my show a month ago, I went out for a walk, and we live in the mountains, and slipped on some ice with my little puppy and ended up breaking my hip. So quite an adventure for sure. I don't recommend it. However, I have to just talk for a minute about what I learned from that experience, because as you might know about me, I look at every experience as chosen and a way to learn some big things. So besides being in denial that my hip was broken for quite a while, I actually started looking within and discovered some really interesting things. One of which is that, boy, being helpless is very triggering. In fact, I remember reading one time Ram Dass saying that. He said probably the most upsetting thing that a human can go through is feeling helpless. So there I was for 3 weeks in the hospital, completely helpless, powerless, etc. And it gave me a lot of really interesting insights into myself. And yes, it's chosen. And I know that in my life, the last 40 years or so have been about really looking within to see what I need to clean up here. I talk about karma all the time, and I've been in touch with a lot of my past lives and know that I'm here to do some big stuff, and I'm here to clean up some big stuff. So this hopefully might be the final straw to cleaning things up for me. But the other thing I wanted to mention about all of this is how when big things like this happen, I find that there's something awakening within us about our purpose. Maybe it's to take it a little bit deeper. Maybe it's to discover a different aspect of it. I know for sure that is what happened with me. And of course, needless to say, it's allowed me a deeper level of compassion and empathy, because I've never broken anything. I'm kind of whole. So it has really opened some doors and some big awareness in me. And again, I don't recommend doing that to get there, but whatever works. Our higher consciousness does whatever works. So enough about me. I want to introduce you to an amazing person, Lucy Forsting, and she's going to talk today about a lot of really interesting things. And as you can tell, I've a little bit of a laryngitis left over from the hospital. So I'm going to let her do a lot of talking, but let me tell you a little bit about her. She grew up in rural Indiana with her German shepherds and 22 cats. I can't even imagine that. Yes. And she had extreme vivid imagination, began creating stories with magical characters. She attended the University of Missouri for undergraduate as well as graduate work. And she started, I'm trying to read all this because there's so much to say about you, Lucy. She worked with higher educational institutions, corporate America, teaching how thoughts can actually sabotage your life. I know I teach that all the time too. It's so important. She developed a widow and widowers program and national speaker for funeral directors because she wanted funeral directors to understand about grief, something they should understand about, right? She's a member of the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists and has been clinically helping people for a long time so that people live happier, healthier lives. One of the things that I want to get into today with Lucy, and we'll get into that in a minute. Let me see if there's anything else I need to say about her. She's a writer. She wrote a children's book. We can talk about that. But she uses Reiki. And I'm sure most of you listeners know all about Reiki, but there's a word that she added to her description called let me know if I'm pronouncing this right. Usui? Usui. Okay. It's a specific method of Reiki that I would love for her to talk about. She also has a radio show called The Synergy Connection, and it's weekly, and she interviews guests. And I think, yes, I was on there. Yes, ago. And let's first of all, thank you for being here. First of all,
you're very welcome.
Scattered. This is the first thing I've done in a month, so I apologize in advance. But tell us, how did you get started in all of this? What is it that inspired you to take the next step in being a counselor and go into spirituality?
Well, we're talking about a lot of years here, so your show isn't long enough for everything. I started out actually in nursing. And so when I went to undergraduate school, I was on a 5-year program. And the program, you would spend your first year on campus, the next 3 years at a hospital setting, going through a nursing program, and then come back to the campus for your 5th year. So you graduated with an RN and an MS. And I knew as soon as I got to the hospital setting that that was not for me. I never was able to, in my estimation, inflict pain. My job was to make people feel better. And I found that I did most of that just by talking to them. So the professors there said, well, why don't you stay and just become, an instructor, teach college. And I thought, no, I think what I need to do is go back and finish my degree, but do it in, being a counselor. So, many years later, I have my master's degree, and I'm working with a friend that I had met along the way. We started an organization, and we actually sought, I guess, money, from a business. It was Monsanto, and Monsanto had a better reputation back in those days than it does today. So Monsanto funded us through a university setting where my friend was a professor. And so we went through them. And the program was called the Thinker's Edge. And so what we did is we took first-time offenders and help them understand this whole idea that you are not what you think you are. You are so much more than that. And because you've committed a crime doesn't mean that you're a criminal for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. So that was our program. And it was to reduce recidivism because obviously, whether you're a first-time offender or you've been incarcerated a number of times, it's very expensive for each given state or federal prison. And so if you can reduce recidivism, then, you're saving the taxpayers a lot of money.
Yeah.
But more importantly, you're giving somebody their life back because they've been labeled. And just like any diagnosis, once you're labeled, it's hard to get out of that thinking. Yes. So if I think that I'm bipolar, if I think I'm depressed, if I think I'm a criminal, I'm going to stay there. So that was kind of the beginning, way back then. And there's a number of reasons that I went into being, affiliated with funeral homes. And one of them was that relationship ended with my former partner, and she went her direction and I went my direction. But I have always heard, if you will, the direction I'm supposed to go in. And so I kept hearing this I hate to say it as a little voice, but it was like a message that was running around in my head saying, call this particular person. And he had the largest funeral home in the St. Louis area, which is where I was at the time. He had multiple locations. And I thought, I knew him from playing golf. And I thought, why do I want to go contact him? And they just wouldn't let me go. I mean, they just kept saying, call, call, call. So I finally called him, and I happened to connect with him, which was surprising. We met for lunch. I had no idea what I was supposed to say to him. And when we sat down at lunchtime, the information was there. They had kept it from me up until then. And I say they because I don't actually know who this is that kind of talks to me. I'm taking it that it's an angelic guide or a past life mentor or somebody. So they said, we want you to start programs for those who are grieving. And he had just gone to a meeting, and the meeting had been about this very thing.
Oh, wow.
And so it turns out that he was very receptive, very open, and he said, come on board. And I started traveling nationally to teach funeral directors across America how to do these kinds of bereavement programs and set them up for them. So now those are being used throughout the United States, as far as I know. Wow. And then I met my husband. And so we ended up going off to Chicago. And, the rest is kind of like history. I ended up from there in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I had a radio show that was live in Green Bay. I was very involved in the community, and I had a counseling office there called Synergy Connection Counseling. And that became 3 different satellite offices. We were the sole providers for United Health and in Northeast Wisconsin. And so that was then. And then eventually we relocated here to Florida. I continued doing a radio show for a while and then decided to go into podcasting. And so now I have, I think, 380 shows. Wow. That are in 8 countries. And so we're on Spotify, we're on Apple, Google, and iHeartRadio, the main platforms.
Can we go back for a second? Because it's very intriguing to me when you said that you were teaching funeral directors to deal with grieving. Can you just give us sort of a blanket understanding of what that looked like or what that entailed?
Sure. Funeral homes back at that particular time, and we're talking about like almost 30 years ago now. But they, were hopefully and are still today very good at meeting the families where they are in terms of setting up, do you want a casket? Do you want a traditional funeral? Are you being cremated? All of that. But they really didn't understand the emotion of grief. There was nobody really teaching them that these are the steps. And so they kind of met them at the beginning of their grief, and they were obviously still in shock, denial, anger, a lot of different emotions, but they weren't beginning the process of grieving at that time. And so they go through the motions of what they need to do to, get everything wrapped up, get the funeral date set, the church, if you're going to have a dinner afterwards, whatever they were doing, they could help them do all of that. But then once the bill was paid, they were on to the next family.
Right.
And so with this, we actually set up libraries. Right now, the gal that I trained, actually, that was the daughter of the person that I spoke with in the beginning, she has done an amazing job and she's now retired herself, but she's done an amazing job of setting up programs in her funeral homes. So they have multiple locations. They have a dog, that is a support dog for families. Mm-hmm. They have balloon releases. They have, so many different things that I didn't even do when I was there. But I started an organization called Coping and Living Life. And that was for widow and widowers so that they had a support system. Because what typically happens, and I've gone through it myself because my husband died over 5 years ago now. But what happens is you go through the funeral and, then all of a sudden there's nothing. You have so much activity leading up to that. And then there's nothing.
Yeah.
And your friends do stay in touch. Mine have stayed in touch. But you're kind of the odd man out, because they still have their spouses in many cases. And so
Yeah.
you're the either male widower or you're the widow. But you don't have the same kind of support you did as a couple. And
Yeah.
so it's important to be able to talk to others that are going through what you're going through. And
Yeah.
that's why the support groups are so important. But my support group that I started, it became a travel group. It became a dinner out group. It became go to the play group. It became a bowling group, a golf group. So they all could plug in to one another and actually be there on a I know how you're feeling and truly know how you're feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny because my favorite show ever in life is 6 Feet Under. I don't know if you used to watch it, but
Mm-mm.
oh my gosh, it was in I guess the 90s, and it was so revolutionary because it was about a family that owned a funeral home. And every week they had a different, really bizarre thing happen with somebody dying. But it got so deep and so real and so um, really different for those days. I think
Mhm.
we're just now catching up with some of the stuff that they presented on that show, but I highly recommend watching it. I think you'd really appreciate it. It's really
Oh,
interesting.
okay.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not even familiar with the name.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, in fact, I just watched it again. I watched every episode, and I think there are 5 years of episodes,
Oh
and
my goodness.
one
Wow.
was better. Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay. So then I mentioned in the beginning that you do a particular type of Reiki. Tell us about that. What is that?
All right. So it's referred to as the Usui Method. Now, there are different trainings, I think, for Reiki healers. And there's level 1, 2, and 3. So level 3 is the master level. And that is what I am. But Usui would be no different than if you said, I went to Princeton and somebody else said, I went to Harvard.
Mm,
So it's not really significantly different in that it uses energy.
yeah.
So having said that, Reiki has symbology. It uses symbols for whether it's long distance Reiki, sending energy to somebody. I just did that a couple of days ago with somebody who was having dental surgery, and she's out on Long Island. And so I took her picture and literally used it on my phone to send energy to her, which she then felt. But typically, you don't do long distance. Typically, it's person to person. And I don't charge for doing Reiki. I feel like it is a gift. And I don't do it as a practice. So I don't have an office for that. I'm basically more of a life coach, and I still do that. And I do consulting work with the like health industry. I do write like a health newsletter, and I've written a children's book, as you mentioned. But the Usui method I learned before my brother died. So I'll give you two examples if I can. One is I learned level 1 over a long weekend, which I highly recommend. I don't recommend you trying to do this online, which I know that they have some online courses. And I don't recommend that you do it in an evening because you can't really begin to grasp and understand what this vibrational kind of frequency is unless you're practicing it with somebody who's been there, done that, and they can guide you through it and they understand how to teach it. So with my first beginning level 1, it was a Friday evening, all day Saturday, partially Saturday evening, and then most of Sunday. And then I received certification as a level 1 practitioner. I get home on Sunday. My dad calls me and says that my brother has brain cancer. And my comment was, "You've got to be kidding me." I remember him saying, "I wouldn't kid about something like that." And so we ended up, I went with my dad to the hospital. My brother had been a smoker. So he had lung cancer that had gone to 3 places in his brain. And he only lived about 3.5 months after diagnosis. But on the last day of his life, he had what was called lymphedema. And so the right side of his body was swollen like twice the size because the lymph fluid wasn't draining. And his right foot had actually started turning gangrenous. So it was black. And the pain, I guess, was intense. So they had been giving him morphine. The morphine wasn't working. I had just learned this method of doing Reiki energy. And I thought, well, this is a perfect time to try it. Let's see if it works. So I held my hand on either side of his foot. And the minute I put my hands there, the pain stopped. But I couldn't stand there like 24/7, blocking this pain. But I recognized how powerful it was. And then I'm going to fast forward. And this happened now 5, 6, 7, 8.5 years ago. So my husband at the time had been admitted the night before into the hospital. He had been fighting cancer for quite a long time, and he used a particular medication that I won't name, but it's a medication that's prescribed. In his case, it gave him Parkinson's, but it also gave him something called lymphedema in his heart, or pericardial effusion in his heart. So he had 500 cc's of fluid crushing his heart. And they called me to tell me that they'd moved him to ICU. When I get there, they pull me aside and they say he has an hour and a half to live. And it was based upon 78% oxygen rather than 98%. They could not take the fluid off unless they could have his oxygen level at 98%. And I didn't realize that you couldn't just put an oxygen mask on somebody and bring their oxygen level up, but you can't because it has to be a cellular level. So they knew that he was going to die. Again, the little voice that told me to contact the funeral director said, put your right hand on the top of his head, put your left hand on his heart. And I'm thinking, he's got an hour and a half to live. Why am I doing this? But I did. And when you send energy, for me, it's a very quiet thing. I close my eyes and I literally can feel the energy moving through me and out to whoever I'm working on. And it's a tingling kind of a sensation. It's like waves of energy that move through my fingers. So when I did that, his monitor showed 78% oxygen. In 30 seconds, it went to 98% oxygen. Wow. And they came running down the hall and they said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm doing energy work. And they went,
my gosh.
Yeah, right. And they went, we don't know what that is. Just keep doing it. We can take him to surgery. And he lived another 3.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you understand that that's who we are a vibrational frequency inside of a physical body. And when you learn to harness that, which is what I do with some of my own clients, is help them learn how to become their own energy field, to create what you want in life, to understand who we truly are at a much deeper level. But it is that, I guess I would say it's understanding that we are 4 energetic fields. We are an intellectual person that usually craves learning until the day you die. We are emotional, obviously. We are physical. But if you don't have your physical, like when you broke your hip, when you don't have the physical, it's very difficult to do the rest. And then we are spiritual. And it's understanding this connection that we do have to our higher powers. But you need to be in alignment in order to make that happen. You can't just say, I want to be connected, because it doesn't work that way.
Yes. There's a lot of stuff that gets in the way of that as well, which I've discovered in my own life and, of course, teaching others.
Right.
Yeah. So why don't we take a little bit of a break right now? And when we get back, I'd love for you to talk some more about how everything interconnects. You know, I called this program Connecting the Dots. I firmly believe that everything does interconnect. And just the fact that I'm listening to a person that is intellectually oriented and, wanting information and all the stuff that you went through to learn to be a counselor and all that you do. And yet you're able to hear that little voice and use energy and do that with people. I think that's just so beautiful. Really appreciate it.
It's a nice combination for sure.
Yes, yeah. So let's take a little bit of a break and we'll be right back. I'm talking with Lucy Forsting, and stay tuned.
OMTimes TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. OMTimes Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, OMTimes offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an OMTimes magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on OMTimes TV and broadcasting it across the extensive OMTimes radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. OMTimes. Open yourself to the possibilities. Transform your life from triggered to empowered with the Perfect Life Awakening program. Royce Morales' extraordinary, enlightening, spiritually based teachings that get to the core of subconscious underlying motivations driving your life. With more than 4 decades as a transformational facilitator and author, Royce Morales offers ways to awaken your deserving, authentic existence, free from paralyzing issues, repetitive patterns, and programmed fears, while simultaneously awakening your spiritually aware higher consciousness, purposeful self. Perfect Life Awakening offers remote group classes and one-on-one sessions to explore even deeper levels. Check out Royce Morales' books, Want, True Love, Past Lives, and Other Complications. No, A Spiritual Wake-Up Call. And Back, Rebirth After Stroke. Learn more about Perfect Life Awakening and Royce Morales. Visit roycemorales.com.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. I am talking with Lucy Forsting, and she's talked about a lot of things, which I think is really interesting, Reiki energy work and all the stuff that she does with people. But as I was listening to the commercial, I was thinking, what is your technique? Because I find that, as you know, because you've talked to me before, but I find that the work that I do with people is about really digging in and getting to the core or the sources, the exact incidents where certain programming took effect in our life. And I find that it's so powerful to do that, but not everybody wants to do that, of course. I have few and far between people that really stick with it as long as it needs to. So what is it that you do with people? What is it that, I know you're a counselor and you use Reiki energy, and how do you combine those two? What do you do with people to help people?
That is complicated, and it involves, each person obviously has their own journey, their own path that they're on. And so the first thing you have to do is you have to find out where they are. Back when I was doing it clinically and not more as a life coach, which is what I do today, when I had to bill insurance companies, I had to have a diagnosis. And in many cases, it was a dual diagnosis because they were coming in either involved with drugs or alcohol or gambling or sex or shopping or some other, condition. So today, because I'm not limited in terms of sessions. When you're in the managed care network, as most providers are, they will tell you how often you can see somebody.
Right. Yes.
And I don't have to be concerned about that anymore. If they want to work with me, it's as long as it takes, and they decide, when we're done. And so in some cases, I'm seeing people once a week for a year. In other cases, I'm seeing them for 8 or 10 sessions. But I find out where they are and where they want to go. So it's not a matter of, oh, you're clinically depressed, or, oh, you have, an anxiety condition, or, oh, you've got this, that, or the other thing. It's, where are you right now? What's causing your problems? They tell me, and then I work with them as to, where do you want to be in a month or 2 months? What will make you feel better? And we work at it from that angle.
Yeah. So yes, insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I haven't had to worry about insurance for quite a number of years now.
Oh, that's great. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I still have friends, that are in that system, and it's so limiting, because you really can't help somebody achieve the balance that they want in their life if you're being told you have 16 sessions or less.
Yeah.
And I was owner and president of 3 clinics. And so it was extremely difficult to, be limited that way.
Yeah.
And that only happened with managed care. Once managed care came in, that's where we went to control cost. But for a lot of individuals, I would say most, you can't get where you want to go in 10 sessions or less. It just doesn't happen. I had one guy that used to drive from Chicago to Green Bay, and he would do my last session for the day, and he would literally run into my office, plop down on the couch, and then say, okay, I'm ready now. I'm like, I'm not a shrink. I'm not trying to regress you or anything else. We're just going to talk. But he loved laying down to talk.
So do you, when you're working with people, do you still hear the little voices, or sense a direction to go with them, help them see things that maybe they're not seeing? How do you actually work?
Initially, I don't have that sensation of, okay, this is who this is and this is where they want to go. After they kind of tell me what's going on, I have a little bit of a format that I use with a lot of people, depending on where they are in their own evolution of who they are. Mm-hmm. So if they're in the very beginning, it's going to be different than somebody who comes in and, they've read Eckhart Tolle, and they understand when I talk about maybe parallel dimensions or chakras, or they understand. So I can start at a different place with them. But I look a lot of times at 10-year increments in their life. So if they're 50, they have 5 decades of belief systems that they've been dragging with them. And so I have them go through every 10 years, and not necessarily with me, it's a homework, and then we talk about it. But every 10 years as to what their beliefs were about their family, about money, about relationships, about school, about work, whatever decade that they're in, then I have them kind of talk about what was their belief. And we can begin to see this trail of limitations that they had accepted as, this is part of my life. In some cases, it might be financial limitations because the family didn't have anything. In other cases, it might be a tremendous amount of pressure to achieve because the family was high achievers. Mm-hmm. We just look at that and begin to say, okay, is this one you want to hang on to? Or is this one you're willing to let go of? Right. So that's part of the process.
Yeah. And do you get into subconscious beliefs at all in your work?
For some individuals, but that's usually a little further down the road because they don't come in with that understanding. Right. Helping them initially look at their chakras, balancing their chakras, because the root chakra has to do with energy. So I break it down. I don't let them go past the first three until they understand those, because the energy to create for yourself is in those first three. And we look at, diet. We look at what you can do to reconnect and make sure that those chakras are healthy before we move into the heart or into the throat chakra. And so I will take somebody through that process and then help them look at that energy and the energy of who they are in terms of a healer, because we all are healers. Yes. But we have to make sure, again, that our systems are in balance. So you just can't say, I want to be a healer. And I watched that with some of the people that were in the Usui Method with me, is they were intrigued by understanding what that was. What does it mean to be a healer? But if you haven't healed yourself, if you don't understand where your own hangups are, then it's a little more difficult to heal anybody else.
Yeah. Very true. I always think of a great quote that I read reading about Gandhi. Apparently, a mother with a son came to Gandhi and said, please, Gandhi, help my son who's addicted to sugar. And Gandhi says, come back in a week. And so she comes back in a week and she says, why did you tell me to come back in a week? And he said, well, I had to deal with my own sugar addiction first. I just love that. Love that. It's so true, And I find also, at least in the work that I do, people are often dropped into my space, so to speak, have something that I need to work on. And so we work on it together, know. They don't know that I'm working on it simultaneously sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes I tell them, but it's, the universe provides whatever we need. It really does.
Absolutely. I'm just now actually doing something that's kind of interesting. I mean, I know that I've worked with my own archangels and angels for a long, long time, but I've never taken the time to actually understand it, like who is mine in particular that's working with me. And so just about a week ago, I decided to, do a little more research in that area. And it turns out that Ariel, who is an archangel, is mine. And it didn't surprise me once I found that out, because not only do I work as a healer, but I'm in with, animals and plants. And I mean, nature is so important to me. Yes. And I had to laugh, because when I found out the first night, that she was kind of the person that was assigned to me, and how I know is a whole different story. But
I was going to ask you that.
Well, I did some meditation, and it was an exercise where you had to choose, a door. And when you went through a particular door of the color of your choosing, she was on the other side. But I couldn't, like I played the alphabet game when I can't remember somebody's name or a word. I'd start with an A and then I just move. And I couldn't get off of the A. It didn't let me go any further. So I said, okay, is your name an A? And I didn't get like an answer. It was more like the waves of energy would say, begins with an A, it has an R. And I finally was seeing, like, okay, is it Ariel? Because I don't know my angels. I know Gabriel, and I know like Raphael, and a few of them, but I didn't know anything that had to do with Ariel. And so it turns out that Ariel is like androgynous in some ways, can be masculine or feminine. And so I could just see this like shadowy figure, but it indicated Ariel was the name. So then when I looked it up, I found out more about it. So this was like on a Sunday, and on Sunday evening, when I'm getting up from the couch and, getting ready to make my way towards bed, I feel something cold and kind of wet down by my foot. And I thought it was my cat that maybe had a hairball, and I was looking at her going, okay. But I looked down, and here is this black, shiny caterpillar, like about 2.5 inches long. And I had no idea how it could have gotten there. I don't have caterpillars where I live. I'm in a brand new community. There's construction everywhere. But here's this black shiny caterpillar down by my foot. And so I pick it up and I put it in a piece of toweling and I take it outside and put it in the grass. And I said, well, I hope you make it. Because it's, and why my cat hadn't found it, I don't know. Because I think, she might have played with it. But no, nothing. So it was there. I don't know how it got there.
A black caterpillar.
And a black one. And somebody told me that black caterpillars usually are monarchs. And of course, the monarch butterfly, interestingly enough, is the very butterfly I used on my widow and widowers. I had like a brochure that was at the funeral homes, and it said coping and living life, but it was a cascade of monarch butterflies.
Wow. Interesting.
So, you see all of these synchronicities,
Yes.
that at least I'm sure it follows you through your life. Mine has followed me.
Yes.
And if you're open, if you're aware of how this works, then it's like, you don't have to worry about getting from A to B. You're going to get there,
Yes.
but you have to be open to hearing and listening and being guided.
Yep.
And if you do that, because who would have known? I certainly didn't 5 years ago that I was going to have a podcast.
Yeah.
I didn't, but I was open to a person that had a live radio show that said, I want you to be on my show. And I was on his show until he closed the radio station down. And by then I knew enough to, start a podcast.
Yeah.
So
same with me. Everything just kind of landed in my lap.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we only have a few more minutes, and I'd love for you to tell us about the book, the children's book that you wrote, and tell us everything you can tell us about it.
Well, it is on Amazon. And if you go to the website, it's www.misstwigs.com. So misstwigs.com. That will take you in, and you can click on a link that just takes you right to Amazon. But it's called The Adventures of Miss Twigs and Company. And again, it would take longer than we have for me to explain all of it. But I think I channeled this from some other former life, quite honestly, because I knew things about Weardale, England, where the mice live. I knew things about the countryside that I would not have known. I knew things about the church that they're born in, where it turns out that there is a mouse carved on every single pew. And so I don't know how I knew those things, but it happens. The book is set at the end of World War II, like in early 1945, and then goes through the war ending. And the mice represent love, truth, and wisdom. And they take journeys into mankind, and they can speak, but only to people who can hear.
Oh, wow.
And so a man who has lost his wife and is very angry is one of the first people that they encounter. And they leave a little piece of blue fluorite to help him remember the visit, because the blue, he needed to learn how to speak his own grief. And the second one is this story is about a little boy who is 11, who's beginning to ask questions about why bad things happen to people and how do wars happen. And he learns that his thoughts create his reality.
Wow. So it's several different stories, in other words.
It's a number of different stories within the book. Okay. So there is a prequel that explains how they get started. And then there is the story itself, but it involves two characters. Mr. Wagner is the man that they help the first time. And Brian is the little boy they help on this visit. But it's all kind of incorporated in one visit in one book.
I see. And what age group is it for?
It's for anybody. I have literally had CPAs read it who took notes. And they said, I wish I had known these things when I was a kid.
Oh, wow.
So it can be as young. The vocabulary is not an easy vocabulary. So I would say if you are at least 8 years old, you could read it. But I encourage families to read it together and then kind of stop after a few chapters and put it aside, but talk about it. Like, what's Brian learning and what are the mice trying to accomplish? And, ask them questions so that it's not a book where you just race through it. It's about 75 pages long.
Wow. It sounds just wonderful. I can't wait to read it. I'm working on some children's books myself, and it's, I've written books for adults, but writing a book for a child or even middle grade, which is what I'm focused on,
Mm-hmm.
it
This
just
would be middle
works.
grade, I think.
Right.
Middle grade would be
Right.
really good. I did it with fourth and fifth graders, and I would ask them, I would, come in and sit on the floor, and I would talk to them and just say, where did we leave off? What did you learn last time? What do you think is going to happen?
Wow.
So it's a fun book, and like I said, I've had adults read it as well as kids.
Yeah.
But I think it's not a book where you want to race through it for sure.
Right. Yes. So
Oh,
tell
by
us.
the way, the person that is the illustrator, I meant to say this, the illustrations are amazing, and he is actually the assistant director at Universal Studios here in Florida.
Wow.
So he did all of my artwork for me.
And did you self-publish?
I became my own publisher, which you can do.
Yes.
So I became a publishing firm in order to do this because I had several people tell me that they wanted to have Universal and or Disney look at it for possibly using it down the road. And I did not want to give up the rights to it. And if you
Yes.
let somebody else publish it, you give up your rights.
Yes, that is true. Well, good for you. So tell everybody how to get your book and how to get in touch with you and all of the information that we need.
Well, they can certainly, if they want to email me personally, they can just use my email, which is my name. So lucy.forsting@gmail.com. And they can come in and talk to me that way. Otherwise, the book, like I said, is at www. And then it's Miss, MISS, Twigs, TWIGGS.com. And they can always go to the podcast, which is at synergyconnectionradio.com. And all of the shows are archived there. And I think there's 28 pages now of shows.
Wow. And when is it on live? Is it streaming?
It is on, it's not like a live show like yours. So you can access it through just going to either Spotify or Apple, or just the Synergy Connection show. And I think you can get to the podcast, but going to podcast and looking up Synergy Connection show is the best way.
Great. And make sure to tune in when I'm on. I don't remember when we've scheduled me, but I know I'm going to be on soon. So
right. And that's, anytime I post on LinkedIn and Alignable and Facebook. So when the new shows are up, I put them there. But then other people that are listening to the, not listening to just one show, but listening to the show in general, they'll see the different people that come up. And there's always a synopsis for every single show. And there's links that will take you to that person's website or whatever link they've given me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Lucy, for being my guest today. And
My pleasure.
I hope people received some value in terms of just learning to trust that, even if you're intellectually based and even if you're just walking through life, we're always able to access the part of us that knows and the part of us that wants to help other people. And I just really appreciate all that you're doing. And I can't wait to read that book because, like I said, I'm working on my own.
Yeah. Well, if you read the book and whether you like it or not, please do a review.
Okay, I will. Yes,
Okay.
thank you. I will see everybody in a week. I took off a month of doing my show, so I'm going to be doing another one next week, and it should be really interesting. I'm assuming that it will be interesting, and I'm just getting stronger and better every single day, and I appreciate all the energy that was sent to me. That was the other thing I was going to mention. When I was laying in the hospital, people kept telling me that they were sending me Reiki and healing and prayers. And I've felt that before, but I've never felt it so intensely as when I was lying there in that uncomfortable hospital bed. I was just bombarded with it. So I appreciate that from everybody. And I look forward to seeing you guys in a week. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.